Okay, we'll move on to general business. Number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. First item up for business under general business is update to the board on the budget status and options for consideration. First of all, I apologize for not getting something of this nature to you earlier than anticipated. It just took us a while to get a footing on where we are to give you good, solid recommendations moving forward. But I've been working with the clerk's office, and we're, like I said, trying to solidify where we are and bring you something for your consideration. Basically, this item is 13 pages, so I can go through it rather quickly, give you kind of a brief synopsis of where we are, highlight again the recommendations, and then we can discuss whatever you choose. Basically, where we are, we're looking at we need to make some adjustments for this year. As I talk later in the item, well, let me just go through the item. Why don't I do that? There's been a lot of discussion about our decline in cash. That is not a secret. We all know that we've been experienced shortfalls in cash, or anticipating some this year, and it has to do with many number of factors. Our revenues are not outpacing our expenditures any longer. We're in an economic downturn. We have been able to sustain ourselves with limited cuts, limited reductions in staff, but at a cost to our general fund. Well, most of our cash reserves in all of our funds. We're no longer able to do that anymore. We're anticipating pretty unfavorable write-up from our auditor this year. We wanted to get out ahead of it, let you know that we're looking at ways to reduce the budget for this year to hopefully stave off an additional audit next year, additional bad audit next year. So just to put you on warning that we're probably going to get a bad audit in the next couple months. So I just wanted to not highlight it, but just let you know. And that's kind of what this item is doing, is telling us where we're going, how we need to get out of there, and hopefully we'll see the light at the end of the tunnel at some point. But anyway, basically our cash declined from a number of factors. Like I said, we didn't bring in the revenues we anticipated. Our state revenues kind of took a decline. Our jail bed revenue took a decline. We also appropriated, for a number of years, a significant fund balance in our general fund, which is using your reserves to maintain your operations. So that's where we're seeing this decline in our cash and our overall, especially in our general fund reserve. And it was not just felt in the general fund. We have pretty much 9 large funds that the county operates on. We've had some small grant funding, but it's really based, the grant funds we don't include because they're based on grants. We only take in what we apply and get. But your basic 9 funds is your general fund, your building fund, your road department, your fire services MSBU, your sewer O&M and your sewer access fees, your solid waste department, impact fees, and 1-cent sales tax, as I listed in the item. For the last number of years, I mean, every fund has not been sparred a decrease in revenues. And I'll just go through a number of them. The building department, as you know, building sector is pretty much shut down. We're not generating any of the revenues that we used to. We're anticipating a shortfall again this year. Conversely, we've had and maintained, to our credit, a large fund balance in that fund. But every year, annually now, we're starting to go through it because we're not replenishing our expenditures. So we're going to have to look at cutbacks. But that's contributed to our situation. The road department, annually, it's in the hole because as gas prices go up, people spend less gas, and operations cost more. Road grading costs more. There's increases in the operations of the fund that are no longer being able to be sustained by the gas tax that we generate. MSBU, and I noted a bunch of these things at the workshop last week, so I'm hoping none of these are a real surprise to you. And we're also had some recommendations there that we're going to bring back to you. But we decreased the MSBU last year for the fire services. But we moved costs there. We moved the paid salaries, the $420,000, onto that fund. So as we are speaking now, we're going to start spending some of that cash now that we had built up, that we were able to save. We're going to start dipping into that as we spend more than we actually take in. So In your sewer fund, you know, again, decline in the building sector, there's no access fees being generated, yet we still have a sewer loan that we're still paying off. So that's almost a $500,000 a year hit against an access fee that you're not generating any income. Your operating O&M, we're slowly pulling ourselves out of the decline there. We've increased our rates, we'll increase them again next year, and they're starting to bring us back to where we're making it pay for itself. But we were for many years, we didn't raise the rates at all. We were at $15 a household, but operations, you know, increased. Solid waste, same thing. We've got high tipping fees. We don't get people taking trash to the landfill. But like I said, the workshop, we're hoping that the assessment will take care of that place if it's imposed, and take care of that situation if it's imposed. Impact fees. We have impact fees, but when you spend them, for the last 3 years, we've been, you know, either it was a moratorium or we've repealed the impact fees. But on top of it, there's been no bill, so we weren't generating any anyway. But we bought a community center portion of our impact fees, which was a $300,000 cash out the door that wasn't regenerated. So these are all things that kind of contribute to that. When you talk about the community center, again, we spent 1.4 total on it. That's just strictly cash. There was no loan. There was cash for a county that only generates $11 million in ad valorem. That's a big hit. So on top of that, the 1 cent sales tax has seen a decline over the last few years. I mean, we were generating about $2 million. Now we budget about $1.7 million. So, like I said, we've got declining revenues and a bunch of other funds as well. But, and if, like, the item goes on to continue with, you know, the issues we've had, like I said, we mentioned the general fund, appropriating fund balance, decreases in revenues. Then it talks about the audit. We're anticipating a bad audit this year. We're trying to stave off a bad one for next year. I think if we show positive signs of trying to right the ship, the audit will look favorably on us. And like I said, see, we're trying to go in the right direction.
Tim, if I can interject here, if Jessica, can you put that table 8 or page 8 up that has a table of current actual, and I want to make sure the public understands, because if I were out listening, I would think, oh God, the sky's falling and we've overspent all of our budget. It's not the case. Tim, can you just walk us through that and show us
Sure. What we
track where we're supposed to be spending wise, and then try to explain this relationship of this cash forward.
Okay.
Because that's what keeps hanging up with everybody. I want everybody to understand that we're not overspending our budget. We're well within our budget. The problem is that we don't have these huge amounts of cash forward like we used to have in the good days. And that's what we're trying to build back up again. And the way to do that is to cut some of this spending we're doing now to be able to accumulate some cash. But I want to make sure the public understands that we're really in line with our numbers as they are now.
Yeah. Sure, Commissioner. And thank you, because I probably was making it more gloomy than it needed to be. But if you look at page 5 and then 6, you'll see where we are with our current revenues. Right now we're at about 62%. At the 5th month of the year, which is what this is based on, we should be at 41. But you need to keep in mind that, you know, we get our influx of ad valorem at the beginning of the fiscal year. So we got most of that in November, and that's not going to be sustainable for the rest of the fiscal year. Conversely, we should be at about 41% of our expenditures, which it seems like we're dead on. So we're hitting about 41%. When you sum all the departments up, including the constitutionals, we're about 41%. So we're not.
So we've collected a little bit more than we should have at this point in time because of early collections on ad valorem. I'm making sure that I'm just reiterating
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
And our expenditures are about on par where they should be for this time of year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Tim, it's my understanding that most people pay their tax bill in, January, February to get the discount. That's why most of our income comes in the first 2 or 3 months. That's
Right.
my understanding.
Correct. So while we're not over budget, we're not under budget substantially. That we anticipate generating enough revenue to there'll be leftover revenue at the end of the year, which is where we should be. In years before, you were replenishing revenues with a fire hose. Now you're pretty much replenishing with a garden hose, and that's kind of. If you look at all your cash as one big pool, every 2 weeks we have a huge splash where we payroll goes out, and you know, takes a lot of water out of the pool. But like I said before, when it was getting replenished with for the fire hose, now it's a garden hose. So we either need to do one thing, minimize the splashes, or get another hose. So that's, at the end of the day, kind of, I know it's a bad analogy, but it's kind of puts it in perspective as to where we're at. So, and at the end of the year, you want your pool to at least have some water left over in it. So you start the new year with some cash, and that's kind of not where we've been the last few years. Let's see. I've kind of reiterated a bunch of the stuff that's already in here. So I'm just going to go on to the recommendations and
I have a couple of questions.
okay, sure. Sure.
All right, I don't see anything in here about our lawsuits, or our lawsuits settled to where we can talk about them. Have we settled our lawsuits?
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
There are some that are still pending.
So there's nothing in this discussion here that reflects the lawsuits even that we have settled and the negative effect that has.
Well, those are, I mean, they were
Yeah,
paid out
it's included in the kind of the 3-year look back when you talk about the general fund and the expenditures.
I'd like to see those broken out
Okay.
so that the public can see where that money, how much that money was, and who's responsible for it.
Absolutely.
Then I have another question. Is we do a budget and we say that we're within our budget, but shouldn't we do our budget based on the amount of cash that we're going to bring in? You say that we're even with our budget. We're not spending more than our budget. But if you budget more than the cash that you have, I'm somewhat confused here.
Well, no, you're actually right on point, and that's why the item is kind of being brought before you, because
Yes.
we're spending what we budgeted,
Yeah.
but we're not taking in what we budgeted.
I guess that's my question. Should we not budget according to what we perceive as our cash coming in? If you budget for $10 and your cash coming in is only going to be $5, then why don't we budget for the $5?
Well, we tend to do that, but we don't know that we're only going to get $5 until we start going through the year. We get most of our estimates from the state and the revenue. We don't know what jail bed's going to do, how many inmates we're going to have, so it's really, there's no perfect science to it. We try to estimate it, and then when we're under, we need to come back and cut back on our expenditures, and that's kind of where we're at today.
If I can, and you're right, you're right on it. Years ago, that's the way we used to do it. Unfortunately, we got to the end of the year, we found ourselves, we were short in all these funds. Tim's taking a proactive approach to it with the constitutional officers saying, look, you know, we're this far, we're 4 months into the year, going into the 5th month, and we know that there's some projections that are low, we need to adjust. And I think, and I applaud him for that. That's what he's trying to do right now, is offer us some alternatives to offset that negative that we're going to have, because we know there's going to be some shortfalls, and we got to overcome that. I mean, he could do nothing, and we could just, you know, gaggle through the year and get at the end and be in the hole. But that's why he's trying to, you know, overcome that now.
I don't have any, Tim, I'm not here again, I'm not going to fuss at, I'm not fussing at you, because really, what you're saying is fine. But I think we should do our budget, and maybe that's what we're doing, but we should do our budget based on what our cash coming in is going to be.
And that's what we did. We did.
Okay.
We did do that. But because of the economy, we didn't know gas was going to go to 4 or 5.
Well, I do understand that.
Sales tax drops off. I mean, everything is hanging on the economy, and we're screwed with the economy, and it.
Oh, I understand that.
So now we're fixing it. I mean, we could wait.
No,
This is the proactive time to do it, is now.
Well, one thing, Randy, you mentioned that we were not going to micromanage the administrator, and I tend to agree with that. But I am absolutely not going to stick my head in the ground and let something happen and then come back later and say, well, I didn't know anything about it. That's not going to happen. I'm going to be out here talking to you, and I want to know, I want to be responsible, because I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to come back later and say, well, I didn't know what was happening, somebody else must have been doing it. And I don't think you expect that.
No, and I would rather be informed, so nothing's a surprise. You know, I don't want to throw surprises at my board.
So now you're going to tell us some alternatives to try to offset some of that loss that we're expected to have. That's what your next part is.
Right.
Okay, tell us.
I listed some recommendations that I think we need to do.
Okay.
To get out of this, to come out in the positive at the end of the year, to come in the black. And the first thing is we need to cut expenditures. So we looked at a number of different percentages as to where we need to be. We thought that we could end the fiscal year with $300,000 or $400,000. We're going to be good because we didn't get here in 1 year. So we're not going to pull ourselves out of it in 1 year. So it's going to have to be an annual thing where we're proactive in trying to build back some sort of significant cash reserve fund balance. We takes about 1.6. I think that's correct. 1.6 a month to operate the county. So we should have at least 3 months worth of operations in reserve. But we know we can't do that in 1 year. So we need to start building that back up and annually build towards that goal and get us back to where we were. And like I said, the first thing that we need to do is cut expenditures this year and start that process. So at the end of the fiscal year, we're in the black. And we looked at a different levels of percentage that we felt comfortable with. And we think at 2.5, if everybody across the board cuts 2.5, is one recommendation that I would make.
Tim, can we get that table on the graph up there so the public can see it? I think it's table 3.
If Jessica can put.
Tim, I wanted
on
to,
page 10.
It's right there, Jessica.
Tim, I wanted to mention something on the revenue side. I just calculated if we take in our local revenue and we discount the ad valorem taxes, which of course is front loaded, we're at 42.7% right now, which seems about where am I thinking about this correctly?
Right.
5 months worth of revenue should be 41.7%. We're actually at 42.7% of what we budgeted to collect. We have actually collected to date. So I just did this real quickly, backing out the ad valorem, because that's, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if you did that number or not, but that's where we're at on local revenue.
Right. And we projected out most of our major revenues to see where we'd end up, but said we're at 41% of our expenditure, almost 42. So there's no net sum gain there. We're still maintaining,
Exactly.
and we're not building. And that's
what I've been telling people is, why is this a crisis? It's not necessarily a crisis, but we need to rebuild our savings account, basically. And in order to rebuild the savings account, we have to either increase revenue, which we can't in the middle of the year unless more prisoners start staying in the jail or people start building again, or we can cut expenses. And that's the only two ways to do it.
Hold on, Randy. Lynn, you had a point.
Yeah, and I think both Mike and Randy have been doing a good job of trying to explain this to the public, and I wanted to just elaborate on what you said. This year, the amount that we predicted that we were going to bring in and what we're spending is a good match this year. And if we had a bunch of money still saved up, we wouldn't need to make any cuts. The problem is, over the last few years, we've drawn down our savings, and we're going to get a bad audit report, not because of our spending or our failure to project revenues, but because we drew down our savings. And so this year we're going to have to cut, again, not because we're doing okay this year, but we've got to make cuts to build up our savings so we won't get in trouble with the auditor. That's kind of the way I see it.
And I want to elaborate on that a little bit. Some of those where we had to borrow down from that savings, and I know that bothers people, and it does me too, because I don't like to have to borrow down my savings to make my household income work. But it was because a lot of those revenues were short in the last 2 or 3 years. Sheriff's jail bed revenue, causes unbeknown to him, happened because of the way the federal prisoners work. We came up short money. We had 1 cent sales tax money come up short. We had a lot of other things happen to us. State sharing amounts of money that usually comes into us. Those all count against us in the end. So that's why we are where we are. But again, we're not We're not broke. I want to make sure that's understood. We're not broke. In no way. I mean, that's a bad word to use, because we're not broke.
If we have no money, how can we not be broke?
Jerry, I don't know where you keep getting that. Show me where we don't have any money.
He says we have no reserve.
Right now, we don't.
We don't have any reserve.
That's where
We have money. You're
to
talking like we're just writing these bad checks.
No.
Yes, you did. You said we're broke. We're not broke. We have adequate revenue to cover the expenses that we've pledged. There's a difference. I mean, when you make that, I mean, that bothers me, because when you make that comment that we're broke, it makes it sound like the sky is falling, and we're not broke. You know, we said we're going to spend $50. We got $50 coming in. We don't have $100, but we got 50, and we're going to break even. Now, I agree. At the end of the year, we want to have another $50 to carry over next year, and that's what he's working on. Tim and I've been fighting about this, because I'm not, you know, he's been making me see the light of the day here at the end of the tunnel, that we got to do something to build up the revenues, and I agree now. And as painful as it's going to be, the only way to do that is cut spending. So we got to do it, and we're going to talk about that here, hopefully in a lively debate here in a few minutes. But don't say that we're broke. We're not broke.
Can I give a quick analogy, since I love doing those so much? This is when I ran the public works years ago. If your profit margin was 0, that's basically where we're at right now.
That's
Our
correct.
revenues equal our expenditures.
Exactly.
We're making 0 profit margin. We're trying to, my understanding is to reduce our expenditures so we can at least get a 5 or 10% profit margin that we can then save and rebuild our reserve. That's my analogy. Is we're not going bankrupt, but we're not making any money.
I guess in my own system, is that if I don't have money in the bank, I've always considered myself broke. And I'm sorry, Mike,
We do have money in the bank. We don't have any extra money in the bank.
well,
There's a difference, Jerry. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get across to the public. There's a big difference in that. There's adequate funds to pay the bills, and then there's extra money. There's no extra money this year.
okay, all right, that's fine with me. I'm not, that's good.
Okay.
I will say one thing to the people, just so you get a general idea of what it costs to operate a county. You hear all the millions and so forth, but it's my understanding that it costs around $50,000 per 8-hour day to run the county. $50,000 per 8-hour day to run the county. That's a lot of money.
If we can, let's let Tim get through these suggestions, and then let's have a discussion about how we want to go down that road.
Thank you, Mr. I think I left off with strongly recommended we needed to do something.
Tim, you left this chart up here, and you suggested, and I wanted the public and you guys to see that equates to a 1%, a 2.5%, and a 3% budget reduction. Whatever we choose to do here, we need to give him some direction, and the other constitutional officers. I'd like for us to do that tonight, if we can. So, anyway, that's what each one of those equates to. Let's let him tell us what those might be, and we can discuss it.
Okay. Well, 1% reduction would generate approximately $199,912 in savings.
That means we have that much cash at the end of the year. We've had socked that away down here in this rainy day fund.
And if all things, yes, and all
Okay.
things remain the same, and we get the revenue.
Let me be sure I'm straight on that too. My understanding, in our budget, we're already budgeting to spend $210,000 of the reserve. So we don't break even until that number goes to 210. Then after that, we start saving money. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, that's important. Thank you.
Because that was a carryover from the budget, this budget year.
We're using $210,000 out of the reserve to fund this year's government. So in some way, Jerry's correct, and you know what I'm saying.
Okay. All right, keep going.
Then we looked at 2.5, which would generate about $500,000, and then 3%, which would generate about $600,000. We are recommending at a minimum we do 2.5, and we asked that translate down throughout all levels of government and through all funds. So we're looking at cutting 2.5% from the sewer fund, from any fund that generates revenue, sales and the 1 cent sales tax. We're talking about eliminating all of those projects except for one. our solid waste operations, the sewer fund, all those. I should note that ESG is willing to participate in that. They cut their budget this year, going into the fiscal year, by $150,000, and they're willing to help us get through the rough time with another reduction.
And Heather, if we do the furloughs, she made an
Yes.
offer today as well.
I was going to get there at the furlough portion. And like I said, I noted in the agenda item, even all our contributions to other agencies, that should all trickle down through the whole organization in order to cut back the budget. And that includes, Senior Center, Tallahassee Memorial Trauma Center, the We Care, even the Health Department. We should, I think, just spread it out for all. Commissioner?
Kim, quick question for you. Out of the positions that we have vacant now that are not filled, we're at 2%, we're requesting the board cut $179,000. I'm assuming that includes ambulance, everything underneath us. Is that correct? Parks?
Yes.
What, by not hiring a county administrator, not replacing the position, I think there's a couple positions in ambulance, what do you estimate that savings to be if we just keep things like they are right now? Those were budgeted expenses that are not being filled, in other words.
Right. I know that I haven't looked at the ambulance positions. I know the county administrator position is at least $60,000 that we would save not hiring until the end of the fiscal year, because what we budgeted and what was used of that portion of the salary, we know for a fact.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is if we just stay where we are today with the cuts that have already been made, would we make up, at least in the board office, would we make up that $179,000, you think, with those 4 positions or whatever?
I would look into it. I don't want to say sitting here tonight that's exactly the case. I would probably still go in through each budget, and I've asked the departments we met last week to get out the scalpel and start cutting to where they can get up at least 2.5%. Obviously, some departments, some of them are single person departments that ain't going to be able to cut too far. So where we could cut elsewhere to make up that difference, but we'll get to 179.
My whole point about this is if we don't have to do furloughs, because that's something that affects customer service. I'm sure you've all read the emails about the Parks Department. That's a position that was not filled, and now it's suffering because of it. So if we can make up that 179, we only have to make it up off what was budgeted, right? We budgeted for a county administrator. We don't have one. We get that back. We budgeted for Eva's position, and we're not paying for it. We budgeted for these other things, and we're not paying for them. Now we need to get, of course, a total. I agree with him about the 2.5%. This will give us about $280,000 to put back into the reserve to build it back up. It's not going to give us $500,000 because we got to make up that 210.
Right.
But I'd be interested to know what we have cut already, if we can avoid furloughs if possible. We got to do it. We got to do it.
In what you said, you add the fire chief into that mix.
I don't know if that position's been rehired.
Has it been filled yet?
No, not yet. But again, that's in your fire MSBU now, so that's not going to really help your. This is looking at the general fund right here. So,
all right.
But Commissioner, I understand what you're saying, and we can definitely look at what we got in salary savings to see if we can get there. But I'd still probably.
I don't want us to lose the big picture here, guys. You're talking about us. We're responsible for that whole budget.
Yes, I understand.
Okay? We're going to have to make the hard decision about looking across the board to everybody and say, all right, tonight we're going to agree on, we're going to say to all the constitutionals, we want a 1%, we want a 2.5%, or we want a 3%. Which do we want? Now, before we get through here tonight, I'm not going to be for us trying to balance the budget on the administration.
I totally agree with you, but we've got a lead.
But
We can't ask them to.
okay, we're leading. We've been cutting.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, how many more budget meetings do we have? 3.
But you can always add more.
Yeah. I had a good friend of mine, give me some good advice, and she mentioned that it would be best if I were to ask the constitutional people to do the best they can and maybe come back. I'm not going to tonight, I'm not going to tell them that they've got to do this or that, 1, 2, 5, 10, or whatever. My request tonight is I ask you to see what you have and then come back.
Are you talking about next year's budget, though? Because
I'm
at the
talking
budget
about-
workshop...
I'm not going to, no, we've got 3 more workshops on this budget.
So we're talking
Right,
about,
that's next year.
We're talking about this year we're in right now, Jared, what we're talking about cutting right now.
Right. We talked about a 5% reduction next year, but now we're looking at a 2.5 or a 1 or a 3% reduction this year.
Right now.
We're asking that, but we're asking them right now to give us 1, 2, 3, or 5, whatever. I'm going to ask them to come back at the next meeting and tell me what they can do myself. That's mine.
Okay.
A couple of quick points. One, when I was speaking with Tim earlier, the main goal of all of this for our constitutionals is that if they can come back and have this much money left at the end of the year, Donnie's already indicated that he has more than we're asking to return to us. I know Cheryl's had money to give back to us in the past. I should probably be using her titles. I apologize. But so as long as that's going to happen, and that's what we're trying to figure out. And then you also get a situation, because the conversation I had was about our supervisor of elections, Wells, was, I don't know, because his main expenses at the start of this fiscal year, when he had that election, and I'm not sure, and it's just trying to figure things out, and all we're, I guess echoing what Jerry just said, if there's possible, let us know. If not, let us figure out, because we're going to have to find that money to do this somewhere else, either from us, or if our tax collector happens to have 50,000 spare dollars around.
I kind of agree to a hybrid. I think we need to ask the constitutionals to shoot for 2.5. You know, again, in private business, this would be going back and finding margin mid-year. You know it's there. I mean, if these guys know, or they don't know, but they predict that they're going to have money left over, or they predict they're going to have savings, let's ask them to shoot for a 2.5%. I don't know if we could mandate that they have to do that. They got to approve budget.
We can do that, but it's, and some of them...
Let's ask first, though. is what I'm saying.
I've asked, and I've heard the same stories that Alan's suggesting from the guys, and talked to Donnie today, Donnie Crum from the Sheriff's Department, talked to Donnie Sparkman, talked to Buddy. I haven't talked to the tax collector yet, but the bottom line is I'm not going to direct our people to do it. If I said this the other day, it's got to be fair. And if we're all going to go back and try to find 2.5%, then let's all go back and try to find 2.5%. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with you, Mike. I
don't think it's fair.
Well, I don't think they're saying that we're not being fair. We're just asking. We're just asking if they will. I don't want to go to Ms. Ola, especially. I've seen her in budget meetings, and I don't want to cross Ms. Ola. She doesn't like for you to talk about her budget, and Buddy only has one person. You'd have to divide himself to take any off there. But I will bring up one subject, and I'll probably be whatever. But I have. I would like to see. I'd like to see the numbers. What would happen if we moved our EMS and the fire department over to the sheriff's department? I have sent a letter to the sheriff requesting that he give us numbers of possibly what he could save if those two items were moved over to his department. So I'm sending a letter to that effect.
I think we have some people looking at that for next year's. That was part of the agreement for next year's budget.
There's no way to get it in this year's. There's no way. Well, fine. Maybe next year's budget. But I think that's something the board needs to agree on. That's something we want to go forward with, and consolidate that and look at. I think there needs to be a significant committee put together, a team, if you will, of the right people to look at all the pros and cons to it. I don't want to go half-cocked at consolidating fire and ambulance.
I would like to see the numbers.
Well, we've got to get a team together.
Couldn't we just ask the sheriff's department to
That's what I've
have a
done.
number?
He can
Look at.
he can look at the departments and know who wouldn't be there or who we would find other positions to reduce the cost. He knows where he can reduce costs.
This has nothing to do with,
That's, yeah.
not this situation, but I guess it's for next year, another topic to discuss.
Yeah, I think that needs to come back and let's debate that in a workshop and talk about how to consolidate those if we're going to do that with it. And I don't have a problem with looking at it. I think it's a good idea to look at. And maybe it's worth doing if we can save money. Maybe we, if they tell us we save, I think we need to come up with a number. I'm not going to say if y'all can save us $50,000. If they can save us $400,000 or $500,000, then it might be worth doing.
That's what I've asked him to give us the numbers.
Well, again, I'd like for the board to make that decision.
I think we talked about this at the last budget meeting. I don't mean to keep getting off subject, but that was one of the things that Tim was going to work on, I think, at least look at the numbers.
Well, I know that the Sheriff's Office and EMS and Fire meeting with Mr. McDermott and all those folks to see if there's some synergy or some economies that we
I
can
did
come
think that was a direction that came out of that budget workshop. So I think the board has given that direction, basically, to look at it.
Okay, let's get back on track where we're going with, we've gotten derailed with what we want to do with this existing year's budget. Are we going to ask them, are we just going to say, y'all come back and tell us, or are we going to give them some direction?
I got another question. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, I had two quick more things. As we ask each of these people to try and contribute another 2.5% from their budget, this is what it looks like we're going to do. I'd like to, if possible, for the programs that the state's talking about cutting funding from this year, which would be the health department and the library, to maybe see if we can wait off cutting from them, because just to keep their doors out, like, if they have they're going to have let people go as it is if they lose their state funding mid-year. So the few $1,000s that would be from each of those organizations could be more impactful than it will be from others. That will be things. And I forget, because I don't have our budget book in front of us, if we allocated, we gave money to one charity, and that was We Care, and you mentioned making sure we cut 2.5% from them also. And I forget if we allocated $3,000 or $6,000 of our multi-million-dollar budget towards that one charity that helps the people in Wakulla. But that would be, according to my math, $75 or $150. If we could avoid having to ask them for that money back, I would appreciate that. Because I think it's more embarrassing to say, because I assume we've already paid them.
I don't know if it's an installment. I'll have to see how the invoices. I'm not.
But I don't want to ask them. He just said it. I'm only stating it because he said I want to cut from, and he said health department and We Care.
Here we are back, guys, to the same, and I don't want to be rude here, but the same mess of, you shove it, and sooner or later you got to say, you got to wear some of it. And I'm ready to wear some of it.
I'm just saying there's going to be, as we say, cut 2.5%. I'm saying, especially with that $75 to $150 from our
It's not
budget,
going to be popular whatever we direct to be done.
it isn't going to be popular whatever we direct to be done.
But I'm ready to wear the abuse, and I'm already getting it, and I've already lost some friends over this. But hey, that's politics. And the bottom line is, let me just get this off my chest because it bothers me. We can't just keep suggesting. We're going to have a backbone up here to say we want to cut 1, we want to cut 2.5, or we want to cut 3. Look out and say, go do it. Come back and tell us. I don't care how they do it. I'm not going to tell the sheriff or anybody else how to cut 2.5% out of their budget. That's not my job. But at the end of the day, they can take it over the months, or we can take it out of the last draw that they get. But somewhere, we're going to take whatever that amount is, let's say it's 1%, and we're looking at, I'll just pick somebody, the clerk, he's not here, he can't cuss at me, but it's a difference of 1%, it's $4,385. He can take that over the next few months, or he can give it all back to us in his final draw.
That was my question.
But that's the direction we need to give. Tonight, we need to give some direction about what to do with the budget, and quit him hauling around and saying, well, we don't want to take it from We Care. Guys, it's tough times, and I care about We Care, but I also care about running the county, and if we don't want to have any, we're going to pay the bills. But when the budget year ends and we don't have anything in reserve, then we won't have anything in reserve. That's the bottom line. So I'll get off my soapbox. And Randy?
My question, you kind of answered it, I guess, is if a constitutional comes back and says, all right, I'm going to cut 2.5%, could they do that via refund at the end of the year, or
Yes.
would we need to reduce our monthly payment to them by 2.5%?
No, as long as we get it by the end of the fiscal year, that's all we care about, correct, Tim?
I don't have a preference in how they do it. I mean, if we're going to
Talk about that today. That makes a big difference
take it
to
from the
them.
last draw, they
It
can
does.
return a check to us for that. I mean, as long,
And they may be able to, finagle it through the year and say, oh yeah, I can do this, and save it up and then give it back to us at the end of the year. As long as we get it at the end of the year, that amount of money that's in red from each one of them, and it goes back in that kitty, I'm a happy camper.
I don't have any problem mandating us 2.5%.
I have,
And
go ahead.
the board, you may be able to cut a little more from somebody else, like Buddy, maybe he can't,
Let's talk about that.
but, but 2% to him is a lot different than 2% to the sheriff's department. Those are two totally different figures. We're looking for a dollar figure, in my mind. So I say 2.5% is what we want them to cut. Come back and tell us how you're going to do it.
Okay, I'm fine with that. That's where I'd like for us to get to tonight.
Why don't we take a proactive stance, and we have a facility out on Shadeville Highway that the clerk is in now, I think. Why don't we just sell that building? We bought it, we made a mistake in buying it, we spent our reserve buying it. Why don't we just sell it?
Who's gonna buy it?
Put it on the market, get a good realtor, put it on the market. You don't know who will buy it. Everything will sell if the price is right.
We can take a loss, I guess, and sell it, but let's stay on where we're at right now. Let's try to muddle through this. Tim?
I was just informed it'd be better if we took it out of the last draw, because by the time we would get it in a refund, it'd be November or December, because when they close out their, like we do, close out our books and realize what their balance was.
Well, I know that two constitutional officers have told me, one in particular knows he's going to be able to give more than 2.5% back. I'm not going to name him. And the other one is almost positive he's going to give more than 2.5% back. So, in the end, but it's going. They're working hard at it. They're working all the systems that they have that's bringing in this revenue. I won't say any more than that, but I feel confident that they're going to do that.
Yeah, me too.
But we just need to give them some direction. Say, guys, we need y'all to come back with 2.5% at the end of the year. And if they can't, and Buddy Wells can't, or the tax collector can't, and they can only give 0.5% or 1%, then we'll make up the rest of it, or whatever it takes. We'll work hard to do that. I mean, that's the best we can do.
Another question. Tim, do you need us, if we approve the 2.5% reduction in budget, do we also have to do the furloughs for you to feel comfortable? Or can we just move forward today with a 2.5% budget?
He wants both.
I'd like to look at what we've saved on the positions personally. And I'm looking at it from a customer service standpoint. You know how mad somebody's going to be, they go there Friday and the building department's closed, or
But we can
the
close
library's-
half days on Friday.
I know, but you go there Friday too, then the building department's closed. So if
I don't want to do furloughs. I'm
Yeah.
totally against them.
if we can make up the money with the positions by not rehiring these positions, it doesn't matter to you, right? I'm just suggesting, it does, if you're looking for a dollar figure to cut, I guess you really don't care how we get there. Or is this a necessary part of it?
Okay.
Yeah, it was 2.5 plus furloughs, but, I will stick to my original recommendation. I think we need to do both, but I'll be happy with the 2.5. I'd be comfortable if we could do that. And then hopefully, like Commissioner said, reduce through,
Well, I mean, if that's what you think we gotta do, then that's what I
Well,
mean.
I'll make a motion to approve a 2.5% reduction in budget.
Second.
Motion to approve a 2.5% budget reduction through the fiscal year.
Through the fiscal year.
Okay, and a second by Ms. Arts.
And if we need to look at this again in a couple months, we can bring up the furloughs or something at that point, but at this time, I think.
I want to suggest that y'all go sit down with Tim and talk to him about furloughs, because I think there's an array of options to do with furloughs, with upper level personnel advice, the common paid guy, a combination of, in combination with holidays. I mean, there's some things we can do to be creative and not just say we're going to cut 28 furlough days.
I'd like to see that information too,
He's
Dan.
got that. Thank you. Chuck Hickman?
Charles Hickman, 528 Hickorywood Drive. This has been a very interesting discussion, and as I was sitting there listening, I heard someone say something to the effect that we have single-function people, and they're sitting in an office someplace. And this goes along with some of the suggestions that Lynn has made with respect to reducing costs. And I know Cheryl Ola, what was it, 2 years ago, they combined the tax office and the license bureau, and I believe they saved some money. As I go around the county, and I've been in a lot of different offices over the last 6-8 months, I see big offices, one person, big desk, and I say to myself, you know, when I first started as a professional, I worked out of a wastebasket and moved from one empty desk to the other. Whoever wasn't there, that's where I moved to work. And I'm saying to myself, why do we have to have one person to a great big office when we could put two people, especially if they are not performing the same function and they're not working with sensitive information like the finance department or the human resource department. I think a study is necessary somehow, and it doesn't have to be fancy. I think our county administrator and their staff could possibly do it. Take a look at the different functions and see if some of these people can't be put in the same office to start reducing some cost. And it might mean that we have to swap some desks out to get two desks in the same office, but I think there's a possibility there. There's just an awful lot to me of wasted space as I walk around this county and look at some of the different offices and how huge they are. Some of the meeting rooms could be consolidated. Not to take anything away from the county commissioners, but there's a little office back there that they use for individual conferences. What's wrong with the conference in your own office? Why do we need that office sitting back there that could be used for somebody in someone's function? So I just think that there's some areas there that could be looked at and possibly reduce expenditures, especially the variable, like lights and air conditioning or whatever. And that was just an observation as I was listening to this conversation going on up here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Howard, Counselor?
Commissioners, first I want to commend the administration for bringing this item forward at this time rather than waiting to the end of the budget year. I heard that there's spending-wise we're not overspending. Yet I also heard that this is not sustainable what we're doing. And I hear that there's a difference in philosophy. And the difference in philosophy is this. We knew as a board that we're supposed to have 3 months of monies in that cash balance because that's what we need to properly have as a county and being responsible to the residents if an emergency takes place. We drew down on that for $3.5 million over a 4-year period of time. The board knew this. The board voted for those budgets. And we're here today dealing with this problem because the board didn't make cuts when I think it should have been making cuts. And I'd like to make some additional statements. On page 2 is a statement relating to the fire MSBU and how this questions dealing with solvency. I think the MSBU fund was doing quite well. As a matter of fact, one of the few funds that was doing quite well until it started to have its funds rated and the shift of the paid firefighters into it. At the same time, we ended up lowering the, not appreciably, but $4. But they were doing well at $65. There's also some statements I'm disappointed in that accounting report that border on biased rather than an accounting perspective, and I'll just leave that to that. When the population expanded by some 20 to 30%, our increase in government spending, as these property values rose, in some constitutional offices, doubled in our county. This is all about balancing the budget. You're collecting less, you should be spending less. Our citizens are expected to do that. But the citizens cannot tax their bosses when they are faced with a shortfall at home. But you as a board can do that. You can tax your bosses as citizens by increasing taxes, fees, and special assessments instead of spending within your budget. Conservative budgeting, please. Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion? Is that adequate direction?
I just want to make sure I'm clear on we're doing the 2.5. We rule out the furloughs, right? The capital projects, we're going to eliminate those for the remainder of the fiscal year. Is that correct?
It's up to the board.
Yeah.
And as well as maintain those other, those other directions have been in place for quite some time now as far as...
We're still going to do the
spending reduction.
intersection improvement on 319. That one's not off the table.
I guess my direction is do what you got to do. I think these are good recommendations.
We're still going to do the intersection improvement on 319.
Right.
But he's
Yes,
doing his job.
That's the only one we kept in there. It's just we need to.
And we just got to do, like Randy suggested, day-to-day functions to make the county work. Otherwise, capital expenditures are off the table.
We just need to take a pause and let our revenues build back up, and that's kind of where we need to think about with this item, is that we just need to...
Good advice.
We've been spending pretty well, we've been doing a lot of projects. Now is the time to back off and let our revenues regenerate and let us build back up some cash, and so we're in a better financial picture.
Just so the public knows that the road we've been working on to get paved is not going to happen now until after this fiscal year, if it even happens in, which is Old Shell Point Road. We're taking that off the table. So I'm just...
Now those gas tax money's going to pay for Old Shell Point Road. I just want to understand, because people ask me questions.
1 cent sales tax.
Okay, the reason we're not doing it is so we can keep that money in cash to show on our books. It doesn't really make any difference. We can't spend it on salaries or we can only spend it on roads, but we're keeping it just to show we got it.
Yes, it's improving our overall cash for the county, overall.
So, okay, that's...
I don't like that. I'm against that, but I'm going to go along because that's what the board wants to do, and that's fine.
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the furloughs, because I know it's not popular, it's not something anybody wants to do. But I guess what I'm wondering if maybe as a board we should request is that we ask Tim to come back at some point in the in the next 2 months maybe, or...
I think Alan pretty much said that in his motion.
What do you want to see, Alan?
I just said that if things are looking as they do now, then this is not an adequate enough improvement if revenue still falls short, to come back with a report of other ideas or suggestions, so we might consider furloughs then.
But we can't. The point I think you're hopefully making is that we can't wait too long, because the further along we wait, we keep stringing this thing along, we're out of time, and then they don't do any good.
Right. And that was going to be my sentiment of coming back with him, because like Commissioner Moore said, we spend $50,000 a day. So if we wait another 2 weeks, then we're going into our 6th month, and then it's less of an opportunity for us to write it, because we've got less time to write it. So.
I look at things fairly simple. I can't see why that when somebody leaves, instead of doing furloughs of the people that are there, my feeling is when somebody leaves, we just don't, everybody, all the way around the table, you just don't rehire. Now,
we have it, Jerry. Look at the list.
Well, I'm just asking the constitutionals, ourselves, everybody, when somebody leaves, just don't rehire. And maybe sometime down the road, when things get better, we can come back and hire those positions that we need.
So you're against furloughs then?
I would, yes. I don't want to rehire. I'm for not rehiring. It doesn't matter if it's whatever. I don't, I'd like to see people take is
that where you were going? Is there more to say?
No, I guess I was kind of restating what Alan's intent was, but putting maybe a little more time urgency to it to encourage the administrator to come back in a month or whatever, to whatever you think is the outside date, where if we've got to do furloughs to reach whatever level we need to be at, that you come to us at that point.
Tim, one more, just briefly, we see the money we got to make up on the board budget. Is it important to you that we do not only make up that money, which I think we have done really with not rehiring people, and the furloughs in order to get us out of this hole? Is that what you're saying, or is that the furloughs one component of the cost savings from the board? That's my question.
Just based on not knowing what intangibles lay ahead of us for the next 6 months, I would be more comfortable with some level of furloughs, just because you don't know what's
Tim wants to be a
we don't know
cash
what's ahead of us for 6 months.
I mean, he's looking to build a cash reserve, and that's a good thing, and I appreciate him doing that. That's what he's trying to do.
Well, it's Alan's motion. If he doesn't, I mean, we can bring another one up if he doesn't want to modify it, or...
Well, we got a motion on the floor now to do the 2.5%. We can still talk about the furloughs in a separate motion.
Right, that's what I meant.
Okay, so let's get this one off the floor. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, entertain a motion now concerning the furloughs. How do you want to do that, Mr. Brock, or Mr.
I
Mayor?
don't think Alan does. I'm going to defer to Lynn.
I mean, if you want to put some matter of urgency to it, that's probably good. Don't leave it alone.
Well, since you've done a little more of the research about the
He can't.
variations, I know he can't make a motion with the chair, as chair, but the 5 furlough days, were you envisioning that to be 5 full days as opposed to
Around
some?
holidays, Tim and I talked, probably the best proposal of all of them is 14 furlough days. 14 furlough days on Fridays, and that saves us, what was it? Was it 60 or 80,000? If there's a good one, I don't like any of it because it equates to a pay cut, and I don't want to do it, period, but if that's what the will of the board is, then I'm going to go along with it.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the administrator's recommendation of 5 furlough days. I'll just get it out of the way, so.
How much does 5 give us?
That's what he recommended.
40,000.
Okay, so we have a motion to
And we
do
could-
5 furlough days?
And we could cater those around, like I said, usually, depending on where it falls, if it's a Friday before the Memorial Day, that's usually a slow day at the office, and hopefully it would go
So
unnoticed.
here's what I'd like to see. I don't know
Let's get a second, we got a motion.
Second for discussion.
if it's even possible, but a lot of time married couples maybe work for the county and their spouse takes off vacation. I don't know if there's a flexibility there for them to take time to coincide with their spouse taking off, or their kids, you know what I'm saying? Does it have to be this particular day, or can they pick and choose? As long as they do the 5 days, can they decide when it fits best with their schedule?
If there's a circumstance, sure. I mean, we could definitely, there's not that many, this is excluding fire and EMS.
Right.
So it's basically just the board departments, unless any of the constitutionals want to participate, but it's really just, you're looking at the board departments, so. But yeah, if there's, we'll probably make them on those holidays, so we're all closed on the same day, say, for the one-person departments, so they don't have different furlough days that are not coinciding with everybody else, but if there's somebody within the department we can work around, sure. I mean, I don't see that being a problem at all.
Now, does that 40,000 just in administration that we save, or is that?
Let's look at, we save $7,865 just in administration if we take a furlough day, so that's just looking at us.
But the 40 you just talked about was the countywide?
That was 5 days at 7,000.
Just us. No property appraiser, no tax collectors.
Just county administration.
That's
But
the,
that's 7,000,
Not sheriff's department.
yeah.
that is the Parks Department, though, in the library.
Where did I hear the number?
Under the board's control.
That's
Where did I hear the number 40,000?
It's there, it's the 5 furlough days. It's 39,329. Now, I should note that we're going to do the furlough days. The county attorney has offered to waive her retainer for, not retainer, what do you call it?
Okay, the
Retainer for 1 month.
5
That's gonna be
days
an
comes
additional
out of the
day.
county office. the 5 days, we saved 40,000, taking 5 days out of the
Yes.
county office. Okay.
Another 10 from Heather, because she's going to give us
Now,
back.
say that again, Tim, what Heather's doing?
She's going to waive 1 month of her retainer if we're going to be on a furlough for 5 days. So it saves her a lot of work.
That's-
She don't have to read all her emails. 5
That's
days,
nice.
5 days. So,
I said that I didn't want to see anybody lose their job. This tough times. We're all lucky to have a job. We're doubly lucky here to have a job. It seems like furlough is a good way. Of course, you still maintain your insurance. Hopefully, we can keep the insurance.
yeah, it doesn't affect it.
Yeah, you have this wonderful insurance. I can't believe how good this insurance is. But
we already did.
I think, I would like to see the constitutional people support possibly the furlough. Nobody loses their job. Everybody takes off a half a day and goes see their mother. Whatever. So I think that's a good way to accomplish maybe.
Okay. Lynn?
Yeah, is there a point at which, let's say when would you envision these starting? If we say we want to do that?
Well, like I said, I was going to try to pull them around holidays because usually Friday before a holiday or Monday after a holiday is pretty slow. I know we've got Easter coming up. We could do one around Easter. We got Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day.
Let's just say 1 April around the holidays that you can work
So
around.
we'll just put one in August just to keep it once a month, so the office is not closed
Okay,
more than once a month.
And the reason I was asking is because if, as we move forward and track, if we're doing better than we thought we would, then could we back down if we need to 4 or 3 or
Pull that.
whatever? Okay.
Okay. So we have Mr. Brock, you have another comment?
Yeah, so I'm not, as I've proven over and over again, I often mess up simple math. I think it's a 2% pay reduction we're talking about for our county administration staff, but they'd be getting off 5 days unpaid. I'd like to see us again delay this, if possible, until we can figure out what we've actually accomplished with our budgetary cuts that we proposed today, echoing the comments that were made earlier. I don't think that it's necessary at this time for us to move forward with furloughs. I mean, as we've already stated several times, we're coming in at anticipated revenue. We're we're just trying to build up our savings in case of an emergency in the future. And I don't know that we need to move towards a furlough at this time after this little reduction that we've just done.
But we're also trying to avoid a really bad audit report.
By having
Yeah, because that has other consequences.
well, so Tim, when we had spoken earlier, you had mentioned that you want to use you're not looking at, are you looking to add this 5 days of furlough, the money saved, as part of the 2.5 that we're looking to reduce, or in addition to an additional $40,000 on top of the 2.5?
Well, I mean, I know we had talked that if we were going to have to do the furlough, that let that be part of the 179 that we have to come up with as far as our 2.5% cut. But if that's not the will of the board, then we'll figure out another way, and we'll come up with 179.
Well, I'd made the motion, I'd rather give him the tool. That way, if he doesn't need to use it, it's there. I'm sure he doesn't want to furlough people. They're certainly going to complain to him about it, certainly, so. And we've got to let the man not let him do a job. I mean, we're overseeing him, but we got to kind of put a certain amount of trust in it, too, that he's...
Okay.
Can I make one more pitch?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think Tim did an outstanding job with this report. It was long, but it was very informative, and the only thing I didn't see in there was cutting energy expenditures. But I want to say this again to all the staff who are looking at furloughs. Turn your air conditioning keep it off as long into the summer as you can. Keep the temperature as high as you can. Turn it off nights and weekends, and you may save yourself. You may not have to take that 2% pay cut if you can save it in the electric bill. So anyway.
Okay. All for the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. So, wait a minute, let's re-vote. All for the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
4-1. Motion carries. Okay, if you will allow me, let's get citizens to be heard out of the way, and then we'll come back to general business. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, Howard Kessler?
Commissioners, I have a question and an answer. Question, who is responsible for seeing that our county government is run correctly, efficiently, and lawfully? There is a pattern that when something is wrong and possibly unlawful, you shove it off onto some government agency or have an internal investigation conducted by those that the finger was pointed at. Both of the new commissioners have the responsibility and the opportunity to try to reverse this pattern. You, commissioners, are supposed to be our citizens' first line of defense against inefficiency, incompetence, and illegality. It is the other government agencies' responsibility to step in when you fail to do your job. Let me give you some examples. Vendors bidding. When there's a problem, don't fix it, just rebid it. At least one vendor gave notice of intent to sue. Anyone held responsible? No one. Housing Department. Programs were found to be out of compliance by state and feds again and again. After receiving non-compliance letters for 3 consecutive years, what was done? Nothing. Now when it can no longer be hid under the rug, what was your solution? Farm it out to outside agencies. A terrible indictment against the county's administration. Our citizens have suffered. Who is held responsible? No one. Former county administrator. When citizens brought serious accusations and voluminous documentation to this board, what did the commissioners do? Nothing. You refused to investigate. You stated this type of thing was not the responsibility of yours but other agencies. It wasn't yours responsibility. One or more commissioners told the citizens if they thought something was wrong, they should file complaints with the State Ethics Commission. In so many words, citizens were told that potential misconduct by county officials was not your responsibility, nor inches to you. That is not acceptable. Wetlands ordinance. County employees issued wetlands violation citations not authorized by law and facts. County was sued, paid damages. Has anyone ever been held accountable and responsible? Now there are issues with the public safety and fire department. Why were several people with EMT and firefighter ratings lost over a short period of time? 3 had firefighter 2 ratings. 1 had held the highest rating of EMT in our county. There obviously is a problem. Is anyone going to be held responsible? Is the solution to have yet another internal investigation? Or will the solution again be to farm it out? I could go on. Commissioners, you are our first line of defense. That is what you get paid for. When are you going to hold someone responsible and accountable for failures? The answer to my question, Commissioners, you are responsible. Thank you.
Okay, Larry Roberts?